Have you ever stopped to wonder if history is actually going somewhere? You know, if it has a purpose? Today, we're going to tackle one of the biggest, most mind-bending answers to that question from the philosopher G.W.F. Hegel. And we're going to see if we can crack his famously difficult ideas using a really surprising key from modern science. So let's really sit with that for a second. Is the whole story of humanity just one thing after another, just chaos? Or is there a script, a direction, a point to it all? This is the huge question that the 19th century German philosopher G.W.F. Hegel was absolutely obsessed with solving.
All right, so how did Hegel try to explain history's purpose? Well, his answer was this grand, powerful, and let's be real, a pretty confusing idea he called spirit. So what on earth is spirit, or Geist, as he wrote in German? For Hegel, you can think of it as the collective mind of all humanity. It's like we're all part of a single, sprawling character in a cosmic story. And the whole plot is about this character slowly, painfully, figuring out what it means to be truly free. Now, for Hegel, spirit wasn't just some poetic idea he pulled out of thin air. No, it was the grand finale of his entire philosophical system. He saw reality unfolding in three basic stages. First, you've got pure logic, kind of like the abstract rules of the universe. Then, that logic expresses itself in the physical world, which he called nature. And finally, spirit is where that universal logic wakes up and becomes self-aware, through us, through human history. So, what's the bottom line here? For Hegel, history isn't just a random walk. It's a journey with a very specific destination, a world where humanity fully gets and lives out the idea of freedom. Every war, every empire, every revolution, it's all just another chapter in that epic story. Okay, that is a massive idea to wrap your head around, right? So let's try to put it in context. To really get what Hegel was doing, it helps to see how his wild, dynamic view of reality compares to some other really big ideas out there. So here we can see three totally different ways of looking at everything. You've got Hegel, who sees reality as a story, an epic drama, pushed forward by conflict. That's his famous dialectic. Now, contrast that with Spinoza. For him, reality is just one single, unchanging thing. There's no story, no goal, it just is. And then you have this fascinating Persian philosopher, Mulla Sadra, who even before Hegel saw reality as dynamic. But for him, change came from a constant process of internal transformation, not some big historical struggle. Now, these ideas didn't just stay in dusty old books. Let's look at how they became a practical, real-world toolkit for thinkers, specifically in Iran, as they were wrestling with the massive challenges of the modern world. So, in the 1960s, Hegel's big ideas started taking root in Iran. First, through some really important translations that made them accessible. But then, thinkers like Ali Shariati started adapting Hegel's ideas about conflict to understand social revolution. And later on, scholars like Tabatabaei actually used Hegel's framework as a lens to diagnose the country's political problems. And this right here is where Hegel's philosophy jumps off the page and into the real world. This idea, the consciousness of freedom, wasn't just some abstract concept anymore. It became a diagnostic tool for trying to understand and maybe even shape a nation's path forward. Okay, so we've seen how Hegel's ideas can be used to analyze history. But what if we could take it one step further? What if we could actually translate his 19th century philosophy into the language of modern science and see if the patterns he found still make sense? Now, before we get into this, and this is really important, we have to be super clear. We are not saying Hegel was some kind of secret neuroscientist, no way. What we are saying is that the patterns he saw in history look shockingly, almost uncannily, similar to the patterns that scientists are now finding in the complex systems of the human mind. It's about analogy, not identity. And here it is. This is our Rosetta Stone. We're translating Hegel into the language of BKM, a modern cognitive framework that helps us understand how minds learn and adapt. So Hegel's grand spirit, the thing that unifies all of history, in this framework, that's like the continuum, the process that integrates all of our mental experiences. His dialectic, that engine of conflict, that's what the framework calls residual strain, that nagging internal conflict that forces us to change our minds. And recognition from others, that becomes a social feedback loop. It's literally how we learn who we are. Okay, so a dictionary is one thing, but let's actually see how this translation works with one of Hegel's most famous and powerful ideas. So let's take Hegel's famous master-slave story. In his telling, it's this epic psychological drama about two people fighting for recognition.
But in BKM terms, you can describe it as two systems in an unbalanced relationship. One system sets all the rules, creating residual strain in the other. But through labor, or what we might call repeated focused action, the subordinate system starts building new skills, new competencies. And here's the genius part. Those new skills eventually create the potential for a total reversal, for a more equal, more mutual relationship. It is the exact same developmental story, just told in two completely different languages, 2 centuries apart. So, what's the point of all this? After we've translated Hegel into history and then into modern science, what's the big takeaway from this whole thing? This isn't really about making a difficult philosopher a little bit easier to read. It's about something much deeper. It's about revealing that the same fundamental patterns of conflict, of learning, of growth, the ones that shape our individual minds, might just be the very same patterns that shape the grand sweeping course of history itself. And that leaves us with one last big question. Hegel gave us a powerful way to see the logic of history. This modern translation gives us a way to see a similar logic in the mind. So it just makes you wonder, right? What other timeless ideas from all of human history are just sitting there, waiting for the right translation to unlock their secrets for us today?